It's been so long. You probably missed these videos, just like you missed Market Basket when it was closed. Maybe even more, because the videos are better than food. Alright, highlights of the American Revolution. So what are we looking at here? American Revolution. Well, you're going to find out. Now this is a nice picture of George Washington, who is the commander of the American troops throughout the Revolution, as he is crossing the Delaware. If just a piece of advice, if you find yourself crossing a icy river in the middle of the night, please don't stand on the ship. You will fall off. So, American Revolution. Where we kind of ended things was we were looking at the battles of Lexington and Concord. So, battles of Lexington and Concord going on April 19th, 1775. And we have this battle which results in 73 British people killed, over 150 wounded. There's a bunch missing as well. And it's really the start of the hostilities. However, just because hostilities are starting doesn't mean the war has necessarily begun. People are still in America, are still divided whether or not we should go, or the Americans should go to war with England. Many people still consider themselves British. And one of the things that really provokes or encourages people that Americans should reject this rule by a king and this parliament, which isn't creating laws for regular people, is this. It's called Common Sense, and it's written by a man named Thomas Paine, who is this fellow here on the right. Now, this is distributed in the hundreds of thousands, and people are really reading about the reasons Thomas Paine is presenting that America needs independence, that America needs states that are independent and have essentially self-rule. So, with this encouragement of a very wise man, you have what's known as the Continental Congress. So, Continental Congress, you have individuals from all of the colonies, and they are gathering, namely in Philadelphia, to discuss what the colonies should do. And essentially, these colonies are deciding that we need to have independence. So, good old Thomas Jefferson, he is going to draft the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence, of course, we celebrate every year on the 4th of July. And it is signed by all members, or eventually adopted by all states. So, yes, it is written in, but it needs to formally be approved by all of the states of America. Now, with independence now declared, we have certainly a stronger push, and we have legitimate war now occurring. There are certainly many members of the states who are opposed to this war. You have these loyalists who are firmly opposed to independence, and they have their opinions heard, certainly, but this Declaration of Independence is eventually adopted, and those people that are opposed to it, they withdraw from the Continental Congress. And the Continental Congress is informally running the country for the entirety of the American Revolution. So, these people are essentially acting as what we today have as Congress. Now, a few interesting things that didn't show up in the presentations. Throughout the war, you have what's known as these prison ships. And while certainly battles are resulting in many deaths, prison ships end up in drastically more deaths. American prisoners are put on these ships. They are anchored outside of various harbors, and the conditions inside are absolutely brutal. You have a lot of people dying of sickness and disease, just malnourishment because their food is not very good. So one of the great tragedies of the revolution occurs on these prison ships, where men who are captured during battles or after battles are essentially left to die, and thousands upon thousands of men are condemned to death living aboard these prison ships. We've covered many of the battles, so certainly we have a lot. One of the most important battles, though, is what's known as the Battle of Saratoga. Saratoga is in New York, and while the Battle of Saratoga is going on, we have Ben Franklin, who is over in France. He is probably the smartest man of American descent, and he goes over to France. He's wearing certainly all sorts of interesting clothes, and his famous attire is he always wears a fur hat. So the French find him quite American, just this very stereotypical American man. But he's famous. He's quite famous at this time through his inventions and sorts of other things. So he arrives in France as a celebrity. He is certainly a womanizer, and is seen as a playboy. So he certainly creates quite a scene. And he's trying to get support, both financial support as well as military support. So while he's in France, the Battle of Saratoga happens, and France sees this as a chance to support the Americans against the British. Remember, the French despise the British people. And seeing these colonies rise up against the English fills the French with great joy. And the Battle of Saratoga, which the American colonies win, this American army wins, encourages the French to say, perhaps these Americans have a chance at beating the mighty British army, which people have mentioned. The British army is the biggest and most well-funded army in the world, and no one really believes that the Americans will be able to defeat them. But Franklin is able to convince the French to provide them with a great deal of money and troops. The English, on the other hand, since they are in need of more soldiers and other supplies, they end up bringing in Hessians. Hessians are German mercenaries, so essentially troops for hire. And Hessians are notable for their fighting strength and abilities, so they are hired by the British to fight for them. This, of course, results in a great deal of anger among the American people, who initially are saying, all right, well, we're fighting the English, we're not great in support of this. We call ourselves English. But once the English start bringing in the Hessians, a lot of Americans who initially are opposed to the war start seeing, all right, well, the British are bringing in foreigners. They're bringing these German people in. So now my ideas about this war have changed. That initial painting of Washington crossing the Delaware, it's famous because he attacks a group of Hessians on Christmas Day. He surprises them. Interestingly enough, a lot of Hessians, these Germans, they end up staying in America after the war. They see how much land there is, especially how much freedom they have. So these troops that initially come over to fight for the English, many of them end up staying and living as Americans. So 1781, the British Army, they surrender after the Battle of Yorktown. And while the war has ended, diplomats, people that are these officials, government officials, it takes them more than 2 years to end up officially ending the war. So while the battles stop, for the most part, the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783, and it officially ends the American Revolution. And not only does it end the American Revolution, but it recognizes the independence of the United States of America, and it established certain boundaries. So if you look at the map here, the United States of America, now official, is in blue. The English or British territory is now in red, so they have Canada. Spanish territory is in brown. Independently of the Treaty of Paris, you also have what's known as the Treaty of Versailles, where Britain makes peace with France as well as Spain, hopefully resolving any disputes over territory. Of course, territory continues to become a great area of contention and results in more fighting for many years to come. But with the Treaty of Paris, the United States is now a place that is real and a place that is on our maps.